In the context of the movie, Rey is someone who like has heard of the Force but has never encountered the Force. And then all of a sudden, she experiences freaky space wizard magic by touching an object that she was experiencing, like voices calling her to. Experiences a massive vision, which is unlike anything she's ever experienced before. And it's not just she's learning the affinity with the Force; it's like her conception of the galaxy has expanded. And that doesn't just mean her destiny, it means just like physically her ability to comprehend like what is at stake if the First Order takes over.
Right.
And then like immediately afterwards, the universe does not give her a chance to go back to her planet. And so like the message Rey is getting after getting attacked is I can't even go back to my planet until I resolve this First Order nonsense. Because otherwise, the First Order is just going to keep coming after me.
And maybe this is me reading into it, so I could be wrong here. But one, it's not like she has an affinity for the planet as much as she has an affinity for the family that abandoned her there, right? And there's some sort of at least indicated link within that prophetic vision that there is a link between what's going on with the First Order and the Resistance and what happened to her as a child. And that, I think, is where you have more of this contemplation on her part that is the destiny forward to find what she's missing, which is her family, is that tied to the conflict that's going on a broader scale in the universe.
I think the thing is like, as a viewer, and I think this, like, you're watching a movie, right? And you spend time setting up this character. And you're not like, you're kind of like, Rey's here, right? Why is Rey here? Rey is here because she has decided she wants to help this droid, which I'll get to that later. I have comments on that. But the entire time, there's still this pushback as to why, like, she can't continue to be here. And so, like, you guys are going for
you mean here being Jakku, or here being with the Resistance, or what do you mean by
with the Resistance? With the Resistance, like with Han Solo, with the Resistance helping them out.
Okay,
I get what you guys are going for. The problem I'm having is you're having to read too much into what's going on in Rey's life. And as the person producing the movie, you don't want to just tell the audience what's happening, but you definitely need to be showing what's happening through dialogue, through interactions with characters, through different shots. And with Rey, the last time we see her interacting with the Force before like all the culmination happens, she gets captured by Kylo and all this, is she touches the lightsaber, freaks out, and says, "No, I want nothing to do with this. Leave me alone. Never want to touch that thing again." She literally tells
Maz.
Maz. She tells her, "I don't ever want to pick that up again. I don't ever want to touch it again."
Right.
And so when I say it's a jump out of nowhere, it is a 180 flip, quite literally, from I never want to touch a lightsaber, never want to use the Force again, to the next time we see Rey, like, actually making choices in terms of like how to move forward, is when she's in a cell and she's like talking to Kylo Ren, and then she just starts using the Force out the wazoo and escapes from this massive planet, Death Star.
No, I think that whole thing with the Force is a whole maybe that is a relevant discussion to have at this point, just because it is the main character and the essence of their powers. So my big issue with Rey isn't so much the problems and how she's developed initially. My bigger problem is that her arc as a whole in the story just simply isn't complete. This story of Rey's arc is pointless encompassed in this movie alone. And so I see this as starting off the new trilogy, right? The sequel trilogy. And in regards to Rey's arc, they started off well, but it doesn't have a capped end at the end of episode 7. And that's a problem I have in regards to character growth, which is later in this review, which is why it got points here for me, but doesn't get points later. Because while they start her off well, she doesn't have a way to... she doesn't develop necessarily into something clearly, other than she's joined a side. But it's not even clear why she's joined that side. And so maybe that's where I get I get off the train in regards to this one, is that that arc just isn't completed, and that's what they set up 8 to hopefully achieve.
Yeah, I think going off what you said, and I'm not like trying to cut Sean off. I just this like what I want to say like has directly to do with what you were talking about in terms of like why she joins the Resistance. And this is another complaint I have about Rey, is she's very obviously supposed to be a Luke Skywalker-esque character, right?
Of course.
When you think about Luke Skywalker is introduced as a restless farm boy. He is stuck in a life he does not want. He wants to be off the planet. He wants to join the rebellion. He talks about it in the beginning of episode 4. And so when he's given the opportunity, it makes total sense for him to join. Like it's just the obvious decision for him to make. With Rey, she is given the like her whole character exudes, I don't want to leave. I am content with where I am. I am waiting for the family that left me behind. And so as soon as she finds out that Finn's with the Resistance, she like becomes ecstatic. And then she just like takes the ship off world. And then she's like, oh, the Resistance is obviously great. I love the Resistance. I'm going to help the Resistance fight the First Order. And I mean, I guess you could make the argument that like, yeah, the First Order was trying to kill her. So obviously she's not going to side with them. Yeah, Sean over here freaking out. But the point, the problem is that why does she stay with them? It's not necessarily why does she join them initially, because that the argument that they're trying to kill her is pretty obvious. But if Rey just like didn't help them in the final fight after like Kylo Ren like attacks her and then all this stuff, why does she continue? Why does she pursue this path of learning the Force with Luke? Why is she the one that goes to find Luke?
Well, okay, that's a different question that I could take issue with, but
okay.
Yes.
Well, my point is why does she stick around? Like the initial joining up makes some sense, but they don't give her motivations in the movie. It's just like she does it. And like the best motivation you might get is, oh, it's the right thing to do.
I think you can go back to Sean's point on this one a bit and say that it's the vision that she has that helps to at least compel her toward that side. But I would generally agree with you that, yeah, there's not like a clear motivation per se why she should be joining the Resistance, other than she has a what's the word I'm looking for? It's almost like the Resistance is a idealistic world that she dreams of in her outer rim planet, and when it appears, she's like, oh, that's super cool. It's like seeing some sort of celebrity group that appears on your planet, and she's excited to see them, but she's not necessarily clear that she wants to join them. There's a difference there. And so I don't know, but Sean, I'm sure you have a few things to say on that.
I mean, I'm just gonna leap off you and say the same thing, which is like her initial admiration for the Resistance is clearly one of like legends, right? Like she's going, oh, I've heard all these stories, and oh, you're the Han Solo, and so like she doesn't want to join the Resistance so much as she wants to admire it and encounter it because it's just so fascinating to her. And then like throughout the movie, I think what it seems like for you, Andrew, isn't like as soon as like they get off the Starkiller base, why is it she goes to Luke? That's your big question mark from what you're telling me. And I think the context of being on Starkiller base is the reason, which is it's not just the vision. It's also the fact that she demonstrated she can do the Force, right? When she mind controls the guard, when she uses the Force to use the lightsaber and wins the lightsaber fight. And once you realize you are a space wizard, you're probably going to want to learn how to use your space wizard powers. And I think it is reasonable for her to go, if there's only one Jedi in the entire galaxy, because that's the way they describe Luke in the opening title crawl, The Last Jedi, then if she wants to become a Jedi, there is only one person in the entire universe who can help her with that, and that's Luke.
I don't think that her seeing Luke, especially at the end, and we can get to this more when we get to that point, it is necessarily the worst thing. I think that there's bigger questions about why she's the one that sees him, though. anyways, I think the point I want to make overall, Andrew, which I reflected on when I rewatched this, was this movie isn't actually that bad. It sets off a series again in a strong way. It harkens back to the old movies in a lot of good ways. It doesn't really lack a ton in regards to content wise. I think that it has a lot of good things going for it. I think the bigger problem is that it reflects on 8 and 9 for the trilogy as a whole, and those ones reflect very poorly on 7 and make 7 get a bad rap. When I don't think that 7 in and of itself is necessarily a bad movie.
I hear what you're saying, Maverick. And I'm inclined to agree with you in terms of like 7, 8, and 9. Like 7 isn't a horrible movie. I'll be honest, I was actually surprised it was a 3.2 when I gave it the rating. And I'm like looking through the points that I gave it.
You gave it a lot of zeros,
like
that's for sure.
Well, like there's specific questions you asked where it was like, I don't really have, like when I think about whether or not that exists within the movie, like I personally am not finding one there. And so like, was like your question about was the main character compellingly flawed? No. Like Rey's character in my mind is not a flawed character.
Well, it's not just flawed,
who,
right? So, and that's where it says, I just summarize it in the email so that it's easier for people to find where it's at. But in the full question on the 9-point system, it's flawed or has something lacking from their life that they need, almost like a hole to fill. And that's where she definitely hits that, in my opinion, because she clearly has this deep longing for a place in the galaxy. And she thinks she'll find that in her family, which has abandoned her. But she doesn't actually know. And so that's a big question of this movie.
In terms of her wanting her family, it makes sense. And like the setup for the movie, sure. But like as soon as she stops caring about going to Jakku, where does that void go? Like there's no clear indication that it has moved to her family is now the Resistance, which is what it probably should be. There's a little bit of like, oh, Han Solo is that. There's like, and like Ben, like Kylo Ren kind of makes the like a mockery of it, if you will, like saying, oh, this like father you never had is kind of gone now after he kills him. But at the same time, it's like, if this is a thing that has been bothering her so much so that she makes a mark on her wall every single day, and she like is insistent that she will stay and wait for this family, there needed to be some sort of scene or dialogue that indicated like this is the family that she has been looking for, or this is good enough for her. Like why would she keep looking when it's right there in front of her? Whereas it's kind of like for a main character, if they're going for the Resistance as being her family, then they needed to spend more time on it rather than just kind of like assuming that the audience picks up on it.